Hello, everybody. Scott Golden, Golden Opportunities Coaching. Welcome to those of you who are new. Welcome back to those of you who are seasoned veterans of what we do around here. What we do around here is discuss mental, emotional, psychological, and coaching-related issues in language that makes sense to you. If you have an audio you'd like to hear, please comment below. Love to help you out. Love the growth of this channel. There's well over 100 of you now, almost 150 of you, we're seeing really rapid growth. We're trying to get to 1,000 so we can help with COVID recovery. Once the channel's monetized, we'll be able to help a little bit. That's something we want to do. So, in any event, please help, share, like, comment below. We're going to talk about borderline personality disorder, trauma disorders, those type of things. This stuff applies to BPD, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and other disorders. Now, please understand this is not medical diagnosis. It's been my experience in coaching people with these disorders, often in coalition with traditional counseling, traditional therapy method, although not always. Sometimes those methods don't work for everyone, so I have coached people with those challenges outside the bounds of traditional methodology. If you believe that you or someone you love has these conditions, get and seek help ASAP. Having been raised by someone that had BPD that was untreated and underdiagnosed. When I say underdiagnosed, what I mean by that is there were professionals that made guesstimates that may have been going on, but never an official diagnosis. I've had frontline firsthand battle scars dealing with PTSD myself, and then BPD with someone I lived with. Actually, a couple of people I've lived with over the years. One a roommate and one a family member. So these are just things that I've gathered over the years. So one thing is that BPD, PTSD, these two things are trauma-based disorders, which means the brain of the person dealing with it, is wired differently. Many of their actions, thought processes, relations to cause and effect aren't going to make sense to you. They're not supposed to, because they're looking at things through constantly what I call the fight or flight lens, right? So they're looking at things with protection being their main mentality. And it's like, imagine if you were sitting on the edge of a seat and you felt like you were going to fall, and all you were doing is protecting yourself from falling. Now imagine living in that space mentally and emotionally. That's what someone with a trauma disorder is doing. They are constantly trying to protect themselves while at the same time appearing, quote, normal, trying to manage their emotions but never feeling they have a complete handle on it, trying to maintain balance but never feeling fully comfortable or safe, and then trying to look normal on the outside. So imagine all of that going on at the same time while trying to do routine, mundane tasks like hold down a job or have a relationship or talk about emotional issues or run to the store or any number of things. It's difficult because you're having to micromanage your emotional state constantly while doing mundane tasks, and you're already exhausted from having to do this every second you're awake. So they're wired differently. Neurosynaptically, the human brain develops differently in trauma core victims, and I think this is something that's under-researched in traditional psychology. The brain scans of people who, I know there's a concussion protocol system, but I actually would like an emotional trauma center protocol for the brain to look at the human brain after someone's been through something like a robbery, a rape, prolonged abuse, incestuous behavior, trauma from natural disasters, and all of that. I would love if the brains of these people who with documented, verifiable stories were examined neurosynaptically and scientifically after they've passed away, because it's my belief that their brains actually are shaped and formed differently post the trauma. And I think it would be wonderful for people to understand the correlation between the difference in brain structure and the difference in behavior. I think it would really help recovery, and I think it would also give way to something I've championed for a long time, probably at least 15, if not closer to 20 years, which is centers for people that have been through traumatic situations where they can go live, not be punished, not be put on low income, but work as much as they can while getting their recovery, and then go back and be reimmersed into society when they feel that they have a handle on their trauma, usually taking somewhere from the work I've done with people between 6 months and 2 or 3 years, depending on how deeply the trauma is ingrained. I wish that existed. I think it would save people money on health insurance in the long run for folks that are in and out of mental health hospitals right now that are short term stay for years. I think it would save people money on addiction recovery. I think it would save the court system money on processing people into jails who don't belong there because they're acting through their trauma core. I just all around and around the world, I think we would have a completely different society if there were trauma centers, emotional trauma centers available for people, because these people are wired differently. And I know I went off on a rabbit trail there, but it suffice to say it was to lead to the second point. These people have a full-time job, and their full-time job is to find their emotional footing. Um, they never know what's going to trigger them. They never know what's going to send them backwards. They never know if a smell, a scent, a phrase, a word, a memory, somebody starting a conversation, a song, a piece of art, anything can send someone into a trauma response core. And I think that's why the removal from society and very intense, almost, 12-hour day, 18-hour day access to talk therapy in an immersion style is the only way that these people can recover. I would even say that for a lot of folks, if they had this, we wouldn't see domestic abuse rates be so high. We wouldn't see child abuse rates be so high, because what we would have is places for people to go who literally can't. And I'm a champion for this because I've been around at least four people in my, well, no, five, at least five people in my life with different traumas who um, all have said, I can't handle life, and yet the traditional system didn't listen because they weren't actively suicidal or homicidal. And yet, I watched their lives crumble. Two of them were child abusers. Another was so crippled by anxiety they couldn't work. Another did commit suicide, and another was dealing with schizophrenia as a result of lack of treatment from the original traumas they experienced. So, having witnessed this on a day-to-day, everyday basis, I've seen the effects of trauma and how exhausting it is for these folks to find emotional footing on a full-time basis. Um, it's important in this case that um, folks understand what post-traumatic stress disorder is. It's a response that drives a person to fight or flight, and that this person needs to find emotional boundaries within themselves. In other words, what can I handle? And finding a safe space to say, I'm overloaded. I can't do this. Um, I was raised by someone who literally would say many times in a day, I can't. I just can't. And unfortunately, the rage and anger and frustration and abusive behavior and toxic behavior and lack of function led to me being an abuse survivor. But had someone listened to this person's boundary of I just can't, I would have been saved literally years of abuse. And also, um, all the bad habits I picked up along the way, people in my life would have been saved while I was figuring out where my bad habits came from, because it was a self journey too. That being said, I think self boundaries is a big thing. People have to know what they can handle, and there has to be a safe place for people to go. And it's like I literally cannot do any more than I'm doing. And if that means a person being removed from society and put into a safe space that's non exclusive. So like mental hospitals, emotional hospitals are great, but they're short term and they're so medication based, and I understand why. They're tied to insurance companies that are focused on get you in, get you medicated, get you out. But I'm gonna say something that I firmly believe: 85% of people are gonna return to those situations, meaning being hospitalized, because their root causes have never been addressed. Their root causes have never been solved in a way that they can manage them. And so what you have is a cyclical nature in a health system that ultimately just sets people up to go back and then try a little while and go back and try a little while. And then what happens is eventually, after 4, 6, 8, 10, whatever hospitalizations, we say this person is, quote, disabled. And then the government of whatever country they're in oftentimes will pick up the tab for them to survive. When in reality, if you take them for 6 months to a couple of years and you say, I'm going to pull you out of society, we're going to completely immerse you in recovery, and then give you a shot, I would say at least 75% of those people could go back to being full time members of society because they've reworked their trauma. And I think that's super important. And again, understanding the overlap between borderline personality disorder, which is just flitting between feeling safe and unsafe and safe and unsafe and safe and unsafe. Like at the core, that's what it is. So they have a part of their brain that says, I got this, and a part of the brain that says, I don't have this. And it's constant. It's every minute they're awake, they're battling that thing. And so their actions, which a lot of people think are attention seeking, are actually, I'm trying to get my balance. I'm trying to figure out, am I safe or not? Because their sense of reality is so interlinked with their emotional state that they don't know what safe feels like a lot of the time. So that's a big issue. And then if you factor the fight or flight syndrome, the PTSD nature into it, that gets a whole other layer where it's like, okay, I'm either going to fight you, I'm going to defend myself, or I'm going to run the heck out of here. And so a lot of these people who are seen as just too damaged, too broken, which then begets, them going into addictions and going into suicidal ideation and cutting and self-harm and all this other stuff, where we say they're broken and, quote, mentally ill. In reality, they're just living through their trauma core, and we aren't giving them immersion of recovery. So that's just what to look for when dealing with folks that are deep in the midst of trauma core, um, living through their trauma core. I think it's useful because I I would venture to say that everyone listening to this knows at least one person in their life or that has been in their life at some point who has gotten to a place where, at least for an extended period of time, let's call it at least 3 months, is like, I can't handle life anymore. And yet no one does anything for these people to take them out of society, rehab them like you'd rehab an injury, and bring them back. Instead, we send them to weekly or biweekly counseling. We send them into a hospital short term, but we don't give them the ability to like rehab that trauma-based injury. And I think that's dangerous and it's unhealthy, and it negatively affects our society. Anyhow, so that's just that's what living through trauma core is about. If you know someone dealing with this, if you're dealing with this, I'd love to help you out. I'm real passionate about trauma core work. If I can be of service to you, please feel free to reach out, either through YouTube or at PO Perception on Twitter. Until next time, everybody.